It started like any normal afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood, kids playing, neighbors chatting, everything calm and peaceful. But things took a turn when an entitled HOA board member, who the locals have nicknamed Karen, decided to take matters into her own hands. Literally. What happened next shocked the entire community. A young boy, just 8 years old, was outside in his custom motorized wheelchair, just enjoying the sun and the driveway in front of his home. That's when Karen stormed in, claiming the wheelchair was a nuisance and a violation of HOA rules. Without warning, she did the unthinkable. Neighbors watched in disbelief as she damaged the child's only means of getting around, ignoring the desperate pleas of his parents. But what Karen didn't know, what she never bothered to consider, was that her actions weren't just heartless, they were illegal. Destroying disability equipment isn't just morally wrong, it's a serious violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The incident quickly spiraled, and once authorities got involved, the story took an unexpected turn that Karen never saw coming. From entitled arrogance to handcuffs, the fallout was swift and intense. But how did it all unfold? And what happened when the police showed up with the ADR violation in hand? You won't believe what came next. So, who exactly is this HOA Karen, and why did she think she had the right to target a disabled child? According to several neighbors, she's been a self-appointed enforcer of neighborhood rules for years, patrolling the streets with a clipboard, leaving passive-aggressive notes, and getting into arguments over lawn decorations and basketball hoops. But this time she went way too far. The boy, named Ethan, has a rare condition that makes walking nearly impossible. His wheelchair isn't just medical equipment, it's his freedom. And until that day, he had always been safe playing near his family's garage. Karen had apparently sent emails to the HOA board complaining about unsightly medical devices being left outside. What she meant was Ethan's wheelchair. The family had received warnings, but never imagined someone would take action like this. It wasn't just a case of being rude or entitled, it felt personal. When she showed up that afternoon, witnesses say she didn't even knock. She marched straight up the driveway and began yelling, demanding the parents remove the chair immediately. Before they could even respond, she grabbed the chair, shouting something about neighborhood standards. That's when things escalated. The chair tipped, parts snapped, and Ethan was terrified. His parents called 911, but by the time officers arrived, the situation had already spiraled completely out of control. As the damage was done, the tension between Karen and the family grew unbearable. Ethan's parents, Sarah and David, were in disbelief, their hearts racing as they rushed to check if their son was okay. Ethan sat frozen, eyes wide with fear, clutching the broken remains of his wheelchair. The parents could barely process what had just happened. Was this really happening in their quiet, suburban neighborhood? Sarah immediately called her sister, who lived a few blocks away. She rushed over to support them, but as soon as she arrived, the situation only escalated. Karen wasn't backing down. She stood there, arms crossed, as if proud of what she had just done. The neighbors who had gathered were stunned into silence. No one had ever seen her act this aggressively before. Most people in the neighborhood had always tried to avoid her. After all, nobody wanted to get caught in the middle of an HOA dispute, but now they had no choice. They had witnessed an act of cruelty. Some filmed, while others whispered about how Karen had gone too far this time. David, trying to keep his composure, approached Karen, demanding an explanation. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice shaking with frustration. But Karen's response was cold and dismissive. "It's against the rules," she said simply, as if that somehow justified the destruction. The idea that she believed her authority over HOA guidelines could override Ethan's needs was maddening. Still, as much as they tried to reason with her, Karen remained unbothered, showing no remorse. That's when the police arrived, but even the officers seemed unsure of how to handle the situation. One officer began questioning Karen, but she was already in full defensive mode, claiming that Ethan's wheelchair didn't belong in the driveway. She didn't seem to grasp the severity of her actions. Meanwhile, Sarah and David, barely able to hold back their tears, were given forms to file a report. But with Karen still unrepentant and the damage done, the situation was far from over. The next few days were a blur. Ethan's wheelchair was out of commission, and while they managed to get a temporary replacement, it wasn't the same. It didn't give him the freedom he needed. The family had to dig deep to process what had happened. The community that they thought would support them was divided. Some of the neighbors rallied behind them, while others defended Karen, claiming she was just following HOA rules. It felt like a battle between what's right and what's official. Was following the rules more important than protecting a child? And if Karen could get away with this, what was next for the rest of the neighborhood? Little did anyone know, this incident would spark a legal battle that no one saw coming. Ethan's family wasn't just going to let it slide. They knew this wasn't just about a broken wheelchair. It was about standing up for what was right, and Karen, she had no idea what was about to hit her. As the days passed, the situation only intensified. Sarah and David were determined to hold Karen accountable for what she had done, but with the HOA still backing her, they knew it wouldn't be easy. The incident had become a point of heated debate in the neighborhood, dividing families who had lived side by side for years. Some neighbors were even starting to take sides, those who supported Karen's strict enforcement of the HOA rules, and those who saw what she had done to Ethan as unforgivable. The whispers and gossip spread like wildfire, making it feel like every interaction was tainted with the tension of what had happened. The broken wheelchair was more than just a physical object, it had become a symbol of injustice. Ethan was struggling with the loss of his independence. His temporary replacement chair wasn't designed for his needs and left him feeling more confined than ever. Sarah and David could see it in his eyes. The joy had been drained from his once carefree spirit. They couldn't just let this slide. They hired a lawyer, and soon a legal battle began to take shape. The tension reached its peak when Sarah received an unexpected call from the police department. They told her that they had been investigating the incident further. It wasn't just about the wheelchair anymore. What Karen had done was a violation of federal law under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The authorities had uncovered a trail of complaints about Karen's actions over the years, how she had harassed other families with children who had disabilities, and how her overbearing enforcement of the HOA rules had led to more than one conflict. It seemed that Karen's past was finally catching up with her. But the real shock came when the police revealed that they had enough evidence to arrest her for criminal destruction of property. The situation was about to explode. As the news spread, the whole neighborhood was on edge. Would Karen face the consequences of her actions? And would Sarah and David's fight for justice inspire others to speak up against the HOA's overreach? The legal and personal stakes couldn't have been higher. The night before Karen was scheduled to appear in court, Sarah sat in the living room, staring at a picture of Ethan smiling in his old wheelchair. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, they had been a typical family. Now, everything had changed. Would the justice system work in their favor, or would Karen manage to weasel her way out of it all? Tomorrow would bring the answers, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The night before Karen's court appearance, as Sarah and David tried to get some rest, a strange knock echoed through their front door. It was late, too late for anyone to be stopping by. When David opened the door, he found a figure standing on the porch, someone he didn't recognize. It was a man in his mid-40s, dressed in a plain suit, holding a folder. "I'm here on behalf of Karen," the man said, his voice calm but businesslike. "I represent the HOA and her legal counsel. I need to discuss an important matter with you." Confused, David stepped aside, allowing the man into their home. Sarah, who had been sitting quietly, shot David a puzzled look. The man sat down at their kitchen table and laid the folder out before them, flipping it open to reveal a series of documents. "What is this?" Sarah asked, already feeling uneasy. The man didn't waste any time. "It's a settlement offer," he said, sliding a piece of paper toward them. The HOA is willing to drop all charges and prevent any further legal action if you agree to a few terms. They're willing to cover the cost of a new wheelchair for Ethan and provide a public apology. In exchange, you drop the lawsuit and allow Karen to remain in her position. The offer hung in the air, as if a decision had to be made in that moment. Sarah and David exchanged looks, their hearts racing. It was almost too good to be true. Was this really happening? Could they accept the offer and move on, or was there something more sinister behind this sudden proposal? The tension was unbearable. Was this a genuine attempt at resolution, or a desperate maneuver to avoid further scandal? The idea that the HOA could simply brush it all under the rug was infuriating. But what if it was a trap? Could Karen's team really silence them with a piece of paper? Just as they began to process the weight of the decision, the man added one last piece of information. "One more thing," he said, leaning in closer. "If you go public with this, well, let's just say there are things we could dig up about your family too, things that could ruin your reputation." The room felt colder as his words hung in the air. Was he threatening them? Was the HOA willing to go this far to protect Karen? The stakes had just been raised in ways Sarah and David never imagined. Now they weren't just fighting for justice, they were fighting to protect everything they held dear. What would they do now? The clock was ticking, and tomorrow's court appearance loomed like an impending storm. The man's ultimatum left Sarah and David in a tight spot. The offer seemed like a way out, an easy way to make this all go away, to secure a new wheelchair for Ethan, and to avoid dragging their family name through the mud. But something didn't sit right with them. They had fought so hard to get to this point, to stand up for Ethan and what was right. Could they really back down now? The man's threats hung in the air like a dark cloud, but they weren't about to let fear dictate their next move. By morning, Sarah and David made a decision. They couldn't just sit back and let Karen off the hook. They would fight for Ethan's dignity, and they would make sure Karen's actions were exposed for the world to see. They declined the settlement offer, prepared to face whatever came next, but they didn't realize the storm was only just beginning. The court hearing was set, and the atmosphere was electric with tension. Sarah, David, and their lawyer stood in the courthouse, ready to make their case. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, reporters, and onlookers. As they entered, the murmur of the crowd grew louder, and Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of every eye on them. They knew this was bigger than just a wheelchair. It was about standing up against an entitled system that thought it could trample over the vulnerable. When the judge called the case, the room went silent. Karen, sitting across from them with her smug lawyer, seemed unfazed, as if she already knew how things would go. But what neither Karen nor the HOA expected was the twist that had been carefully set in motion. As their lawyer presented the case, revealing the destruction of Ethan's wheelchair and the violation of federal law, he also dropped a bombshell. New evidence had come to light. The evidence wasn't just about Karen's actions, it was about her history. It turned out that the HOA had been secretly involved in several other incidents where they had used their power to intimidate vulnerable families. And what shocked everyone was the revelation that Karen had been under investigation for prior misconduct. The man who had visited Sarah and David the night before, the one who had made the threatening settlement offer, he wasn't a lawyer at all. He was a private investigator working for a group of local activists who had been following Karen's every move. They had gathered enough information to take her down, not just for damaging Ethan's wheelchair, but for her entire reign of terror in the neighborhood. The courtroom was stunned. The judge, clearly taken aback by the new information, called for an immediate recess. Karen's smug expression faltered as her lawyer scrambled to figure out what had just happened. The case had gone from a simple lawsuit to a full-blown scandal. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about exposing the corrupt underbelly of the HOA and bringing justice to everyone Karen had hurt over the years. As the recess ended and the courtroom reconvened, the judge delivered a shocking verdict. Karen was arrested for her actions, and the HOA board was now under investigation. Ethan's family had won, but the victory felt bittersweet. The damage done to their lives could never be fully erased, But they had done it. They had exposed Karen for who she truly was. Just when they thought they could breathe a sigh of relief, a final twist came. As Sarah and David walked out of the courthouse, they were met with applause from their neighbors, those who had supported them, and even some who had once stood with Karen. But then, as they turned to leave, a reporter approached them with a startling question.